Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas, sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet, and it is coming up to 1:45 in the afternoon on Tuesday afternoon down here, down under. That means for my guest, Christi Bintliff, who's in the Raleigh-Durham area in North Carolina, it's coming up to 9:45 in the evening, and she's wide awake, as bright as a button, and we've been chatting for about 45 minutes. Christi, welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast studio. It's so great to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here tonight.
Now, I apologized in my email. We haven't spoken at all, but I did apologize in case you needed subtitles to understand me. Are we going okay? Can you
Oh,
understand
we're
my...
doing great. How about me with my southern accent? You feeling it?
I'm feeling the Southern love already. So yeah, we're gonna go just fine. And I've enjoyed the preparation because every guest has a different preparation. Some are old friends who I've known for a long time. Some are non-dental. Some are people I bump into who are non-dental, and I say that's a good topic for dentists. But you fall into the category of somebody who I spotted on LinkedIn, and I thought this person knows their stuff. This person is also jazzing it up so that it's exciting, because selling practice management and all that sort of stuff to dentists is a hard slog. And you really
Totally.
do bring a level of excitement to it. So let's hear your story. Tell us, you've been in dentistry for a few years. So tell us, how did you start and how did you get now into the consulting side of dentistry?
Well, I'm still a baby. We talked about that beforehand. But I've been in dentistry. I'm getting closer to 40 years in now. It's hard to believe it because I still feel like that young, fresh-eyed girl that was like, "Oh my gosh, dentistry, wow!" And so when I started out, I was IT major and I hated it. And so a trip to the dentist changed everything because at that time they were looking at going to digital, and that was very new for them at that particular time, way back when. And so they were asking me about it, and then as I'm checking out from that appointment, they wanted me to come back later after 5 and talk with them, and they gave me this opportunity. "How about you come and help us get our office set up on, IT and embracing all of that, and we'll teach you dentistry." And I thought, you know what? Anything to get me out of that cube. So I never thought dentistry was going to be where I would land. But thus, I think that there's divine intervention at some point. And I went to work for two amazing dentists, and I never looked back from that. They met you where you were, and I was a fresh, bright-eyed girl, and not really knowing what life had ahead of me. And they were just really good about meeting all the employees at where they were and taking them to somewhere they never thought possible if you took them up on it. And I was just one of a few that did. And one taught me the business end of dentistry, and the other taught me about positive motivation and emotional intelligence and all that stuff before it became front and center as it is today. And I was just drinking it in, just drinking it in. And I loved every single moment. I never felt like I wasn't learning something under their tutelage.
That's a fantastic story because so many times that's like and I mentioned this to Gary Tackett, it's like a 1 in 20 chance
Yeah,
that you get one of those, and you've got two of them, so that's like a 1 in
yeah.
400 chance that you've landed on your feet. Because as you were telling me that story just then, and I've not heard it before, I'm thinking, did they teach you how to evacuate a mouth and mix up amalgam and stuff like that? Did you learn
Yeah.
that later?
No, after I got them set up on the got the computers set up, and, by that, I mean, they were nowhere near as advanced as we are now. It was basically just the scheduling. All the other stuff was still paper, the big bins of all the charts and everything, but then it was almost like my contract was coming to an end, and I thought, "Well, this is it." They were like, "You wanna learn some chairside?" I was like, "Sure, I'll learn a little bit about that," because that was back in the day where they would do a lot of the in-office training without going to a school, and I learned from that, and they sent me to be X-ray certified, so I got that, and then did hygiene assisting. I was because we ran 2 rooms, and so I've worked every part of the office without the ones that required an actual license. And one of the dentists that taught me about the back end of dentistry said, if you're willing to get your hands dirty and you're willing to learn it all, if you are looking or striving to go beyond this, you need to know how it all works. How the admin, the clinical, and the business side, how they all are interconnected. It's like its own little ecosystem, so to speak.
Wow, that is so good because they obviously identified in you that this was something that they could give you that would allow you to become something more. And
Yeah.
so not only teaching you the business of dentistry, but also, as you mentioned, how to use the emotional side and
Mhm.
and I guess the persuasive side
Yep.
of life and business and use that in dentistry as a force for good.
Yes.
And let me just say that because a lot of people believe that selling is a dirty word in dentistry, but because dentistry is a grudge buy and people would rather do nothing than get their teeth fixed as a
Yeah.
choice, that's not in their best interest. So we need to be able to persuade them to
Yeah.
get the dentistry that they need done for their betterment, not only of their teeth, but their whole body and their health. So
That's
I'll
right.
end my lecture there and throw it back to you. But tell me about some of the persuasive lessons that you learned. Did you go to courses like, I'm thinking of
Well,
Darren, Jim
they
Rohn,
they
Zig Ziglar.
they were really good about taking their team every year, the whole team, to training. So I've been to dental boot camp. We've had Linda Miles in the practice when I first started, which that was like, oh, I want to be like her, as every young girl at that time did. As we went along, we were at one time, Tony Robbins was partnered up with a couple of people outside of dentistry, and he was doing seminars infused with them, and so I got to go to that and meet him, and then that really set me on fire as far as that positivity. So I've learned a lot of different things by going to those courses, the Hinman, all of that. And I felt like I had this natural ability to connect with people at all walks of life, and that just made it a lot easier for me with chairside and doing a scheduling part of it because I met them where they were and we formed a friendship. So I could call them up and be like, "Hey, Mr. Johnson, you know what? I got an appointment waiting for you today." And then we'd laugh a little bit and he'd be like, let me see if I can make that happen. I think I can make that happen. So I learned to not be a poser in terms of what the instructors were teaching me. I took what they said, but I also made it be my own and let my personality kind of come out. And that's just how I've been throughout my life is this, take it all in and delete what doesn't work for you and add what does and just keep building as you go along, and they were just amazing dentists to work for.
It sounds like they were, to give you that opportunity. On
Mhm.
what you just said, you raised a very important point that it's all about conversations and
Mhm.
connections and
Yes.
trust and friendship. I've given you 4 things there, but they all interrelate. But if you can ring or greet or farewell a patient with that, "Hey, it's your friend Christy calling. How you going? Oh, and by the way, we need to get that appointment booked," as opposed to, "It's blah, blah, blah from Doctor blah, blah, blah. We
Yeah,
need to see you, blah, blah, blah." There's a complete difference in it's the same message they're trying to send, but it's a complete difference in the delivery, and you get a completely
exactly.
different result. And so that friendship
Exactly.
so it leads me back to the question that arose in my mind as you were telling me that. Did you develop that because of the environment that you came into, or does it I know we mentioned something before we hit the record mic, or were you just that sort of kid that was always out to make friends and be a friend and enjoy friendships? Because remember, every child is born the same. They
Yeah.
can't talk. They're never born with a phone in their hand. They're never born with a handpiece in their hand. These are learned skills. So how did you learn to become, what do you put it down to that made you the person that you are and that you became?
So to get on a personal level, when I went to work with them, and this was what was so cool, they met you where you were. They didn't know what that story was that was in the background, and we always have a story that's going on in the background. And so what had happened was, my father passed away when I was 13, and then probably about 90 days later, give or take, I lost my mom, but not in the same way. I lost my mom to a bottle of alcohol, and so I was 13 trying to figure out grieving my father, also trying to deal with the loss of my mother in the way that she was, and I wish I could say she was the happy-go-lucky, but I got the other side of alcoholism, and so there were some pretty hard things that were said to me in that time frame, and they came from a parent, and so you start to believe at some point you're searching what the lie and where the truth is in it, and you start to believe that the things that were said terribly to you become the truth. But when I went to work with them, they started to show me a different side of me that I had forgot about, which was that girl that was, youthful and fun. And they just sort of brought that out. And I never told them that story until probably maybe about 10 years after I had left and gone on to something else, and they had no idea that they really had changed my life on so many levels that they weren't aware of. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind for leaders is that we don't know the stories that are playing behind the scenes, but we can give them a platform to rise up and level up and step into their own if they choose to embark on that. And that, we can't force them, but we can provide a way for them.
That's it. It's a very deep and meaningful story, and thank you very much for being so open and sharing that with me, almost a total stranger, uh, as opposed to people who you had known for so long. You've probably heard similar stories that people become who they are in spite of their upbringing rather than
Exactly.
because of their upbringing, and that you figured there was something better inside
Mhm.
you. You just had to find out how to bring it out. So
Yeah.
congratulations and kudos to you to do that. And fortunate for you that you landed in such a wonderful place that allowed you to do that, because
Mhm.
sometimes people just keep going from one disaster to another, and it
Yeah.
becomes a habit, and we never know what they truly can become at all. So
No.
congratulations to you for doing that. Because when you said you went from you had to get out of a 3 foot, what was it, a 3 foot cube, and I thought, well,
Yeah.
isn't that a dental suite is well, it's
No,
a
no,
little cube
honey,
of
no, honey. You see my personality, and I'm in this little cube, and I'm writing programs. Back then, it was like Cobalt for financial, which is used in banking, and then it was another program, none of which are around anymore. And when you made a mistake, you had to go out in this long hallway, and it was printed on a dot matrix printer, and all the way down the hallway, you went line by line to find that error to try to fix it, and it was like, "My goodness, what in the world did I get into this?" But there was a reason I needed that. That was the stepping stone to the next, uh the next career path. I had to go through that to appreciate how much I hated it, but how much I had learned to be able to help those dentists at that time.
It's funny because you could have ended up in a bad dental office, and that could have put you again. There's plenty of people who leave dentistry for that same thing. This
Oh,
is not
yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
May not be it be, and yet others do end up in dentistry forever.
Yeah.
And so you were very fortunate. Just thinking now, I think of two people who came to work for me as dental assistants, never been in dentistry before,
Uh-huh.
still in dentistry 40 something years later as a result of
Wow.
me giving them that opportunity. Some of them are in
Yeah.
sales in dentistry now and
Yeah.
management. But again, kudos to you in terms of finding a love and getting results. And really, it comes down to people. And
It does.
dentistry's like that. You get the opportunity to chat with 10 to 20 different people every day about their life. And by the way, it's time for you to go and see the dentist. Come back and talk to me when you're finished. And
Yeah.
that is exciting. And I think
Yeah.
that's what helps to build a great practice. You sent me a few topics to discuss, and
Just
I
a
thought if
few.
we discuss these few, we'll be here till maybe tomorrow night or the next night. But one of them I think was quite exciting. And it's a great title. It says Runway Before Takeoff, Culture First, Speed Last. And I think from my understandings, and I haven't really told you, I built my office in a working class part of Sydney on providing customer service to my patients, which allowed me to charge more than my neighbours because we
Mm.
gave them more than just dentistry.
Right.
And but I didn't really have a system, and it wasn't until I was at a mastermind meeting in Chicago for dentists, a quarterly one, and they brought in a customer service guy from Cleveland, and I remember I thought, "This guy's making sense." I bought his book. I read his book on the flight back to San Francisco. I was flying American. He was flying to San Francisco and then to Sydney on United. So 2 planes side by side or one after the other. And I remember contacting my wife. I said, "This book's really good. This guy's doing a tour in Australia. I've got to go and see him."
You gotta go
Well, the
see
day he
him.
was in Sydney, I had a full book of patients. And so you never cancel your patients. You've got to, otherwise, your name is mud. So I said, "I've got a day off. He's in Brisbane. I'll go to Brisbane." I rang my wife after seeing him in the morning. I said, "We've got to do a course he's doing in Cleveland." This was May. We got to do it in July. 4 days, you and me, it's on customer service. It's the missing piece of the puzzle. And one of the things I learned from him very quickly was a quote from somebody called James McManaman, who was head of Ritz-Carlton. And he said if he was starting a business, any business, he would start on hiring on culture first. He said,
Mhm.
I would build my vision and mission statement first. Then I would interview people based on that mission statement and only take on people who agreed with that mission statement.
That's
And
right.
then I would train them after that. And that's the principle of creating a great team. That's the principle behind Disney, Ritz Carlton.
Mhm.
It's about the culture. And so tell me how you coach teams on culture.
So, there's a lot of practices that aren't clear on what their culture is. And one thing you have to understand, in order to be able to attract it, you've got to create it. It can't go in any other order. But when I'm interviewing them, first of all, it starts with the ad. The ad has to. I've done it different ways, and I've failed at just writing it about, oh, we're here for a dental assistant, blah 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 blah. But particular in today's time, when you write the ad from the culture part of it, and you're painting the picture with the words you're writing in that ad, and then when you call and do the phone interview, you're talking about the culture, and then when they come in the in person, again the culture, and then you let them talk to some of the team who understands the culture, so they connect the dots. And part of that is giving them the expectations of what you expect in your culture. Great customer service, finding your way, but learning from these tools that we have and the training that we have, understanding we're not throwing you in that respective role that you're hired in. There's going to be a slower ramp up the runway, so to speak, to get used to the culture, the people, bond and form those relationships and see how we all work together and how we handle certain things. And recently, I will tell you, they say there's I'm running on a tangent. That's what Southern people do. So excuse me. But people say that there's a shortage of hygienists and or assistants or whatever the case may be. And I don't disagree with that, but I do know that there are people out there, and every single one that I have interviewed recently have said it's not that they're looking for the job, they can find the job anywhere on there. They're looking for a place that speaks meaning, that has a supportive and collaborative team that's willing to invest in the onboarding process and training, and that goes beyond the dentistry part of it and does something about being back and giving back in the community. So again, it's making that culture come to life. I don't know that I answered that correctly.
Well, I think you said a very important thing, and that is that you've got to get the culture first. That's what
Mhm.
McManaman said. You can't build the culture after you've got the team, because if somebody's behavior doesn't fit the culture, they're already in the team.
Yes.
And so, um,
And it's important that, particularly like on the interview process all the way through to they get in the office, everything needs to be mirroring. Everything needs to mirror what you said and wrote in that ad all the way through so that, and I will periodically ask them now, what you read and what you see with me talking to you, are we mirroring that? Just because I want to make sure they're anchoring into everything that I have said is true. This is who we are. And when they come in, part of it is understanding, like I said, when you're going through the onboarding on the runway part of it, is understanding those expectations in handoff, understanding those expectations with that patient call and conversation, understanding how to talk the hard part about money and how to handle that. And we go over all of that in those first 30 days, and we may extend it a little longer, but they're not in the first 2 weeks in their role. They're slowly walking that runway and learning that walk like the supermodels do before we send them down, that they're gonna be, rocking it. We want to set them up for success, and I think sometimes as owners, we're quick to miss out on explaining the culture and throwing them in a role that they're not ready for, and then we get frustrated and annoyed, but we failed them to a point. We have to flip that script and change things in order to have those long-term employees again.
well, it's got to be fun for them, but they've got to have a purpose. And I
Mhm.
think the most difficult thing for anybody to come to work in a dental office is that they have a preconception that dentistry is a torture chamber
Yes.
for the customer. And so the first thing we've got to do is say that, without that treatment, we're actually causing them harm by not
Yes.
doing treatment. We're
Yes.
allowing them to harm themselves if they cancel their appointments, because we're
Mhm.
allowing disease and decay and destruction to continue, and pathology to continue on.
Mhm.
And once we think about that, then it makes our life much easier in that we're doing them better.
Right.
I've mentioned to you about my wife and how she worked in our office, but she came to work in our office. I tricked her. So when I met Jane, when I met her, she was a shop assistant. She had
Oh.
taken a break between first year and second year of school teaching for whatever reasons. And she went back to school teaching, became a school teacher, and she was a very good school teacher of elementary school, you would call it. So
Oh, wow.
kindergarten to year six. And of course, the better you are, the more they push you to kindergarten. And the only way you can get out of teaching kindergarten is to go on maternity leave and never return. And so that's what happened. She went on maternity leave, and then she then extended that into a leave and then another child. But as our children got old enough to, as I said, find their own way home from school, she
Mhm.
grabbed to parents and citizens. And I said, no, this is not where you belong. You need to be a concierge at my practice, which is a foreign job. He'll go, what's a concierge at a dental office? Just come in and schmooze people. And
Mhm.
so she did. But then one day she turned up, as she used to, a couple of hours after we started, and she said, I said, "We've got bad news. Both receptionists are off sick today. You have to answer the phone." She goes, "How hard can that be?" By the end of the day, I said, "How was your day?" She said, "Oh, it went really well." She said, I helped all these people cancel and reschedule their appointments." I said, "How many did you make?" She said, "None." And so that was her definition of customer service. I helped them get what they wanted, but it wasn't what they should have got.
Exactly.
She understood that. She then said, "Well, we need processes." And so her teaching helped her to develop her skills. But my point was that many of my friends were my patients, as often happens in a dental practice. You'll
Hmm.
know. She said the most difficult thing was all of a sudden she's sitting across a desk from somebody who's just had some treatment and they've got to hand over $2,000 for
Yeah.
dental
It's
treatment.
hard for a lot of people.
And she said, "That's my friend. I got to ask my friend for $2,000." And she said, "But then I realized that what it's not that they're surrendering their money. They've been given a healthy improvement to their
Hmm.
life." And so it's that thought. And so getting that cultural thought is what's our purpose.
Yes.
And back to customer service is, my motto was, we have to make Mrs. Smith's visit today better than it was last week. We've got to make her next
Exactly.
visit better than it was today, every single patient.
That's
And that's
right.
and you agree with me.
I totally agree because if they've had a great experience chairside, whether doctor or hygiene, and they come up front and it's a complete disconnect, you've lost them because that's the last point of contact that they have, much like the first point of contact is when they're calling in. But if both of those are a disconnect from what it's like in the middle of the runway, then you've missed the mark completely. And back in the day when I was coming up in dentistry, we were all about going to those courses that were enrollment courses, so to speak, but it was, that one-on-one and you were teaching that dialogue, and I still use some of that today because those were the foundations of especially someone that was coming fresh into dentistry, to just try to help them, give them a foundation with those difficult conversations.
Yeah, and you mentioned Linda Miles,
Mhm.
she came to Australia many, many times. I even brought her out to Australia. Her message never gets old. It's
No.
it's that same principle of having systems, and the systems are focused around what the patient experiences and enjoys and comes back for.
Exactly.
And that's all you've got to do in dentistry is that's your point of difference, because there's plenty of average dentists who don't know that.
Yeah.
And so it's
They
easy to
don't
be
know it.
they don't
And,
wanna know.
they don't wanna know it, and they end up being at a plateau. Well, at a plateau, you only have 2 choices of where that practice is gonna go at some point, and that's gonna be down or up. Where is your focus gonna be? You have to always be changing with the time, and as we go along, we have an influx of a younger generation who talks a completely different language than we do, who wants to be communicated in a different way than us old timers did. They're more tech savvy. And so you have to learn to change, and you have to learn how to teach that with your team, that there are certain ways you have to communicate or bridge that communication with certain demographics in your office. And then understanding that it may be slightly different in its presentation form to a younger demographic. Same message, but you're learning to express it differently so that you're connecting with all of them. And that's something that I see a lot now as we've got that mixed up with even with team members, age-wise, multicultural, multi-generation. We have to learn how to communicate with all of them. And that was the hard one for me, is realizing that I was getting frustrated because they weren't listening and they weren't performing, until I realized I was talking in my box. So I wasn't meeting the needs of all of them. Only the people that were in my box. And I was like, that was a hard pill to swallow, but it was an eye opener at the same time.
So how did you achieve success? How did you work out how to get out of your box and into their box?
I remember, because I've been learning how to do public speaking, kind of get yourself on the stage. But I remember doing a team building meeting. and I got looking around the room and I saw people doodling and they were that blank look. And I'm thinking, I'm not reaching them. There were a few I was. And then I started looking really harder at it. And that's when it clicked. I was only communicating with the ones that understood our language in our generational box. And when that light bulb went off and I could choke it down that I was the problem, then I started to research more on how to connect with the different ages that I was leading. And all I can say is that once I did that, and once I taught that to the leaders that I worked with, that all of a sudden you started seeing a gap that was a mile wide. You started seeing everybody starting to come into total perfect harmony and alignment because they understood the message. You paused in that meeting to talk to the one that needed it in a different expressive way. And then you could rock it out in your own way with the ones that were in your generational box. That's when it was when I knew I had hit the sweet spot of success and connecting with everybody and not just a few, and I think that's important as a leader.
That is the sign of a really great speaker, Christi, to be able to connect with everybody in the
Mhm.
room. I was state president for the Professional Speakers of Australia for
Oh, wow.
2.5 years here in New South Wales, and some of the people who I look up to in stage presentation, they will progressively walk their eyes around the room, connecting with
Mhm.
everybody eye to
Yeah.
eye. That's a big challenge. Even
It
my
is.
mother, as a school teacher, said she just looked at the back of the classroom just
Mm.
above,
Mhm.
and hoped that she got people. And as a speaker, sometimes you tend to favor one side more than the other. And
Yeah.
the challenge is that, well, if I can't get everybody, let me just see if I can get some.
Yeah.
And that's a tough way to earn a dollar as a speaker. So again,
Yeah.
it's difficult, but I guess it comes back to your audience is a mixed bag because the people bringing that audience to you haven't done the sifting and sorting beforehand, and they're hoping that you can magically change the people who may not actually be appropriate for the
Yeah.
roles that they want in dentistry. It's a your
It's hard. We some people, are just gonna be a natural and they're like a diamond in the rough and you have to work with them in terms of, in the hiring and getting them on board. And then there's some that as leaders, and I'm guilty of it too, or I had been, is that we will just want to just shy away from those hard conversations that we know in our gut, oh my gosh, we've got to have this conversation, but we will find every excuse not to. But the longer you delay it, the longer that it takes root, and the longer that in particular employee does not understand that the behavior that they are exhibiting is not in alignment to your culture. And you have to address it sooner or later because the longer you let it go, the other employees start to see that that's acceptable and they start taking on some of those behaviors. So even though it's hard, and trust me, I like to do the warm, fuzzy feeling, everything is sunshine and roses, but at the same time, when I have to, I just break it down and I try to look eye to eye with that person so they understand that this conversation is serious. And putting it back on them, I know you have it in you. I know that you can be successful, but it's a choice that you have to make based on what we have to offer. I can't force you to do anything, but the path we're going down is not going to end in a most favorable way, and I don't want that for you. But you just gotta handle those tough conversations. That's part of the culture, not letting that take root.
Well, it's very important to hit the nail on the head early,
Mhm.
squash that behavior, get rid of that behavior and get it sorted. And it's either sometimes it might mean a different career path for that
Yeah.
person if they can't change. But you're right, the longer you leave it as a leader, the less respect your team has for you for delaying the inevitable. And
Mhm.
so I like to tell my clients when this person moves on or then your team will celebrate you for
Uh,
acting quickly.
100%.
Mm. And, but I also tell my clients too that I think this came from Dan Kennedy. It's very difficult to educate your dog on its behavior a week after it's peed on the carpet. Like
Uh,
you've
on
got
the
to get it
spot correction.
yeah,
On the
yeah,
spot
yeah.
correction, yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, they don't understand. And so,
Mhm.
again, it happened in a meeting this morning. They were reviewing the previous week's appointment book. And I said, you've got to review it on a daily basis because you're on Tuesday and you're starting with Monday last week. They don't remember what happened then. And
Yeah,
so we've got to, if you want to fix it, you've got to fix it within 24 hours.
exactly.
And then it will be fixed. So it's tough. Dentistry is a tough gig to train
Yeah,
in.
it's tough, particularly when you're a dentist owner and you're walking that runway on 2 paths. It's tough for managers. It's a tough gig when you're in those upper level leadership roles, and, some days it beats you down and you just think, "I don't want you to hand me one more problem." No problem. But then we get up and we shake it off, and the next morning we're like, "Yeah, let's go. We got this. We're gonna crush it out today."
Do you ever get dentists come to you and say, "Here's my problem, you fix it"?
Yeah. I do have that, and, one of the things that has been my greatest heartwarming thing that I have done is to help these young dentists that come from an associate role into their ownership, and I've transitioned many like that, is to just help them when they come to me with a problem, say, "Okay, that's a problem that's a challenge. What do you see as a solution?" Because I want to see if they've have a thought process of it or that they're hitting the mark somewhere and then kind of coach them from that point. And a lot of times they do know how to handle it. They don't have the confidence to handle it. So just asking that question, what do you think the solution is? And sometimes I'll get, well, if I knew I wouldn't be coming to you. you know, then we have a little joke and I'll be like, "No, but seriously, if you think about it, how would you feel would be the best way to handle it?" And because you're teaching them how to think about it, and then they might ask a couple of questions and then you stop them there and you'll be like, "Okay, but have you thought about this?" It's easy for us to give them the answer. Trust me, it's a lot harder for me to slow the process down and kind of break it down into those components, but I feel that that's the best way they learn, and I do the same thing with team members is to just try to get them to get in that process of thinking about those solutions and having an idea. And let me tell you, sometimes they will surprise me. They will have a better approach than I will. And I'll be like, I have to write this down here in my book here.
Yeah, very clever. And I used to find that occasionally I would get a team member working for me who would come to me with every problem.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
easy thing to do was to say, "Do you mind if I think about that until the end of the day or tomorrow?" And
Yeah.
usually, whatever time frame I gave them, and when we visited, I'd say, "Now, what did you think would be the answer?" And their answer would be what I would think.
Pretty
Then it's always better that they've thought of it, even though I could have
agreed.
told they never learned to walk on their own. So
Exactly. That's part of that runway. They have to learn that walk.
it is difficult. You touched on it very quickly. The biggest difficulty, I think, in dentistry is learning how to run a business, whether
Mhm.
you do a startup or whether you go from an associateship into a business that you bought or a startup.
Yeah.
Those are big changes. All of a sudden, you are owning a business and you haven't run a business. A lot of dentists haven't even read a business book.
And they don't teach it in school.
Of
A
course
lot
not.
of
Yes.
they might just dabble a little bit in it, but there's not that component that's taught, so they don't understand it.
It's a shame because they don't know marketing, they don't know
Mhm,
HR, they don't know, um, customer service. All they know is how to drill teeth and get
mhm.
narrow margins.
And
Nobody
it's
goes
neat.
to a barbecue and says, "Look at the margins on this crown, aren't they good? What are yours like?" "Well, mine are better than yours." Nobody says that.
And, a lot of especially it's tough for them if they're coming from an associate role where they've been one of the gang, one of the girls, one of the guys, and then all of a sudden now there's that shift and they are the owner. And it's hard to have that transition because the employees, it's hard on them, but that's something that needs to be taught. How do you, in the beginning, to set them up for success? Yes, you want to be their friend and buddy, and you want to have that relationship. But at the same time, if your longer term goal is to be an owner of that practice that you're in, you've got to start walking in that mid-level leadership, so to speak. And that's something that I don't think is addressed to a lot of associates. And, it really isn't doing them a service if you're not teaching them at that level how to walk in that leadership role so that that transition can be a little bit easier on them and for the employees.
Yeah, it's 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 a sad indictment on society, and you will know this, that a lot of them successful entrepreneurs that society looks up to are really tough people to work for.
Oh gosh.
You know, Steve Jobs,
Oh,
Welsh,
That
very successful.
when I was coming up in dentistry, and I've heard the girls at other offices say this, the dentist that they started working with in the beginning of their career is not the dentist that they end up with at the end. That person mellows out over time, and that intensity level that they had is not necessarily as abrupt as it was in the beginning. But some of them come out of the gate pretty like, that's hard. It's hard to take.
Well, I think they don't understand. I came from parents who were employed all their lives. They weren't
Mhm.
business people, so they were just they always had somebody to answer to. So now,
Yes.
as an owner of a business, all of a sudden you don't have anybody to answer to, but you've got to please a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot.
The biggest challenge I find in coaching dental offices is it's models that scare me, where there's too many part-time employees, part-time dentists, part-time OHTs and hygienists, part-time dental assistants, part-time receptionists, that there's no consistency for the patient.
No.
Every day the dentist works with a different dental assistant, there's a different receptionist, and so dentistry becomes a commodity in that sort of situation as opposed to an experience. And
Exactly, and don't you agree? I mean, you've been in it a long time that the the success rides on the experiences that those patients have, and you want it to be memorable. Particularly in today's time where social media, you can be like, "Oh, I had a terrible thing at this dentist, blah, 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 blah." And then another patient's going to read it and like, I'm not going to them, no way. But I remember when I came up, it was all about the relationships and they lasted like forever. Like, the practice that I still manage a practice and I do consulting also, but we have patients that have been there since day one when that practice opened 40 plus years ago, and they're sending all the new patients in. That's the kind of relationships you want to build to be successful, where you have that constant flow and you're not having to do those direct mails, and your patients are your greatest advocate for that because you created that space that was just memorable in some way that they look forward to coming back every 3 and 6 months.
it can surprise you. When I left my practice and I sold it, and I stayed on for a while,
Mhm.
but as I was leaving, my practice was an aggregation of other practices. So firstly, my neighbor next door, in the suite next door to mine in the same building, was selling his practice. I just bumped into him and he said, "Yeah, that's my practice for sale." And my coach said, "You need to buy his practice. Bring
Right,
it into
next
yours,
door.
merge them together, th whatever he wants, don't haggle, you'll make it back in spades." And the beauty of his practice was that he would have been, 25 years my senior, and it was his father's practice before that that went back to the
What?
Second World War patients.
What?
I inherited these patients, and he was a good dentist. He did good dentistry. He wasn't, an underproducer, and he wasn't an overproducer. It was a very good practice. But when I was leaving, this one lady, and I would tell some people and not others that it would be the last time I was seeing them. And anyway, it was up to my reception staff. But Jane came and said, "This lady wants to say goodbye to you." And I went in to see this lady who was in her 80s, and she said, "Look, I just wanted to thank you for looking after me for these last 18 years." And I said,
Wow.
You were a patient of Ken's before that, and for a long time." And she goes, he never said anything to me. He'd just say, "Open up," and then half an hour later he'd go, "All right, see you next time," and that was it. You guys, you asked me about myself, about my gardening, about this
Mhm.
and about that. I really enjoyed coming. You made me feel special.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, not only were you Ken's patient, but you're Ken's dad's patient as well. So you
But
don't
she
know who
remembers your experience that you created for her.
and you
That's
don't know who
amazing.
you're going to influence, what sort of
Mhm.
influence or impact you're gonna have on their lives. And so to remember that story, I'm talking about 12 years ago that happened. So,
Mhm.
it's nice and heartfelt to have stories like that. By the same token, Christy, when I left that office, I would bump into some patients, and I went to work at a friend's office another 6 or 10 miles away, and I bump into some patients, and they go, "David, it's just in the wrong direction for me to go. I just don't go up there." And I'm going, "It's only twice a year." I'm thinking, "So who are you gonna" it's kinda like, "All right, he's gone, let me find someone else," or as
Yeah.
opposed to it's weird. Dentistry does create some very interesting relationships, and even with
Mhm.
social media, we were talking about this beforehand, I check the birthdays every day on my Facebook list, and occasionally people pop up and I go, "You were my patient like 12, 20 years ago, and I haven't heard boo from you, but you're still in my Facebook list." Maybe you don't realize, maybe my algorithm's not working for you, but it's bizarre to
Uh-huh.
think that there's still a connection there. So it's crazy, but I think if there's one thing we can tell anybody watching this, and they'll get it from what you've said, and they get it from our conversation, Christy, it is you've got to start with the culture. You've got to build the
You
relationship,
do.
and then you would have seen it. You would have seen bad dentistry come in, and some
Uh-huh.
patient come in, and you go, "Who was your dentist?" "Oh, Dr. Jones, he was such a great guy. I went to him
Mhm.
forever." And you go, "He was a magician. How did he make this stuff stay in?"
Yeah, and we have to keep that in mind, when new patients are coming in, that they are aware of what's going on, and it's taken them a considerable amount of courage to make that appointment, and to if you can create a safe space for them where they don't feel self-conscious, where they feel like this is a place that I'm going to find help and a solution, you have that patient for a long time because you treated them as a person and you didn't judge them. You got in the mindset, I'm here to help you. And that's all about that culture that you're creating.
That's all they want. They
Mhm.
wanna feel respected. They don't wanna feel ignored or taken for granted. And
Mm-mm.
if you cross that line and they feel ignored, they'll take their business elsewhere. And it's not
Oh yeah.
because you're a dentist, you've just let somebody slip through the cracks. And
Yeah.
so again, that's a system in itself. How do we
It is.
prevent patients from slipping through the cracks? In the old
Yeah.
pen and paper
Yeah,
days,
because pen and paper days, I remember when I first started, you had a call list and you wrote that patient's name down if they didn't reschedule, and you were taught reactivation, call them in a week, get them reactivation because the longer they wait, the longer they're apt not to schedule. But with all of these automated systems that we have today with the computers, they can send out the automatic, oh, you missed your appointment. We'd like for you to come in, blah, 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 but there is nothing better than that phone call, and there are a lot of dentists that I work with that they pick the phone up themselves and say, "Hey, Miss Johnson, I just realized I was thinking about you the other day, and I realized that I saw you on the schedule a couple weeks ago, but I see that you didn't reschedule, and I just wanted to see if there was any questions or concerns that you had that you wanted me to address." Now, when that dentist takes that time, that's a whole 'nother level because they're like, "Whoa, he called me. He thought about me." But at some point, when you go back to the old school ways, they still work today. They're still creating that connection that you can't do with a computer like text and things like that. They want that human connection, don't you feel?
absolutely. And I'm forever going through the processes in a dental office. Did it in my own office, and even today where somebody and a geek who's not a patient and not a dentist has invented a process. Oh, that'd work well. And it dehumanizes what used to
Mhm.
work really well of two people talking to each other. You
Yeah.
know, here's one I fought tooth and nail to keep. We used to get, when we got computerized, we used to still have a paper day sheet, sticky taped. You call it sellotape, sticky taped on a cupboard wall, and the receptionist would come down with a highlight pen and walk in and go, "Excuse me, Dr. Moffat, just to let you know," it's the only time they use the word just, because it's a softening word. They'd go, "Just to let you know, Mrs. Jones has arrived for her 10 o'clock appointment with Emily, the hygienist, and I've thanked her for coming in early." And I didn't realize how powerful that was until I went to work in an office as a dentist when I moved down here part-time. I was working a couple of days down here, and the dental assistant would just go, "Yeah, next one's here." And I'd go, where's this
Okay.
coming from? And she's changed the screen from a chart to an appointment book. And she's saying that in front of this patient who's down here. And this patient's probably thinking, an hour ago, I was, "Yeah, next one's here."
Yep.
Is that how they talk about their people? And so let's go back to that message. When the receptionist came down and said that, first of all, she says, "Excuse me, Dr. Moffat." So the patient in the chair hears politeness.
Right.
I say, "Hi, Barbara. Hi, Jane." And they hear politeness back. And then they'd say a message and they'd say, "And she's here for her 10 o'clock appointment. And I thanked her for coming in early." Because I used to have them come in and they go, "And she knows she's early." And I'm going, that's like saying she knows she's stupid. Why are
Yeah,
you here? You're stu-" And so we changed it. How can we say that better? So, but that language is lost if a blue light comes up on your computer screen. That language is totally lost. And
exactly.
and even in hygiene, for the hygiene check, I said, "My hygienist needs to come and get me.
Mhm.
Stand here, have a conversation. We have code as to whether it's gonna be a long exam or not."
Yep,
They say, but an associate dentist will say, "Oh, I can't leave my patient. They're paying for my time." But I say, "Your patient is probably a hygiene patient who knows that this happens when they're in hygiene twice a year, and they're happy
exactly.
to live with it." And so it's just there's a lot of give and
It's
take.
on that handoff and that communication that's going on and how you learn to finesse it, just be fluid with it. And another thing is tapping back on what the patients hear. As the doctor is leaving the room to thank the assistant or the hygienist. "Jane, thanks for being here today with me and helping me take care of Mrs. Johnson. You are amazing." Because that patient hears that, and what does that signal? Wow, he really appreciates his team. You know, this is a great place to be. And nothing fills me up to hear that when I hear the dentist coming out of the room, and that's that final segue as they're leaving is that transfer of appreciation to the patient. They also appreciate them and to the assistant, whoever's working on them. Yeah, that's like, I love to hear that.
It's so simple, easy to do, but
Mhm.
easy not to do. And the
Exactly.
ramifications of not doing it are you're just like everybody else. The dentist has either run out of the room or they got their head in the computer
Mhm.
and they haven't given the full message. And everything relies on, like you said, the handoff, as you call it. I call it a handover down here. I don't know whether
Mhm.
that's because we're down under, so we got to get over, or
Well,
it's
and it's the
it,
it's the same when they're coming out from the back and they're going up to the front desk. You don't just leave them there standing until somebody's available. You stand with them and you hand them off. "Jane, is gonna take care of you. I've made her hygiene appointment, but doctor, has recommended that she have a crown scheduled, and she did have some questions about finances with that." And you're handing it off, and then that person takes it from there. But that I'm doing a team building, a retreat for the year, and so I'm studying the airlines and the cruises and all this, and every single industry has that handoff. They're showing you how to do it, and that's why some of them are still very successful today because that's what they teach repetitively and also in that onboarding process.
yeah, I'm a big fan of taking what I've learnt from travel,
Mhm.
from hospitality and travel, and putting that back into dentistry,
Yeah.
in restaurants, in airlines, in
Exactly.
hotels, and seeing little things and saying, "Yeah, I can see that." And it's funny, my physiotherapist, every appointment at the end, she goes, "David, are you in a fund?" And I go, "You know I'm not in a fund, Sarah." Yeah, it's like You just put it beside my name, David No Fun. It's like my hairdresser. He used to say, "How do you take your coffee?" "I don't drink coffee." "Oh, okay, all right, I'm sorry." Again, we had a patient. He said he took his coffee. 2 sugars, white, 2 sugars, stirred anti-clockwise. So when he came in, it was kind of like, "Hey, Martin, I've just made your coffee. White, 2 sugars, stirred anti-clockwise." And he loved that. Of course, it was just, he was very quirky. And
Yeah.
it's all about those relationships.
It is. I remember a patient of ours that he kept saying, "Nobody acknowledges my birthday. No, nobody acknowledges my birthday." And so the next time he came in, we all dressed up as cheerleaders and we had the birthday cake and we had a little dance and a little song. And he just talked about that forever. But give them that wow, give them that moment, make them feel special. That's what dentistry is all about, those relationships.
We 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 used we used to send Christmas cards and birthday cards, and
Mhm.
one of my patients said, "You're the only person that Graham gets a birthday card from." And I go, "That's her husband." I go, "Really?" And she goes, "Yeah." In fact, she said, he and I, they had different surnames. "We have a bet as to see which one's card arrives first for Christmas." And I said, "Okay, let me fix that." And so it was July. So what I did was I found one of last year's cards and I wrote it and sent it in July. "Merry Christmas, Graham." So he got his first. Well, that was just a crack up in their household.
My
I
gosh,
win.
but no, and you can't teach that. I mean, we can teach it to a certain point, but they've got to be comfortable in creating those moments, and I live for those moments.
Well, that's, yeah, facts tell and stories sell. And
Mhm.
the best thing that you can do is give somebody a story to sell their experience of
Oh,
how
yeah.
good a dentist you are. And it can be really rewarding when these stories come back about, "You said this to me as a patient, and I've kept that memory of," and you
Mhm.
say, "Didn't realize it was that impactful. Thank you."
Yeah.
Chrissy, we're at the end of our time. We've hit the hour. So thank you very much. I was right. We have run out of time. So we will make some more times for sure. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for being a
Ditto.
guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Tell me, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
So they can reach out to me at LEAP, LEAP, 2solutions at gmail.com, or feel free to contact me on my cell number 919-798-2116. I look forward to hearing from you.
I think your phone's going to run off the hook. I've got this all down. I can write fast. Got it. That's great. Chrissy, thank you again so much. And it's been fun. Are you still awake? It's like almost
Oh
11 o'clock.
yeah, I'm gonna write some articles and do some more work after this. I'm fired up.
Good for you. Well, thanks again. Lovely to chat with you.
Sure, lovely to talk to you.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.